Collective behavior is all around us. We see bird flocks, fish schools, animal herds. And what really defines these systems is that there's no global orchestrating power. The individual units are locally communicating with each other, and yet remarkably through these types of communication, we're still fairly bad at predicting collective behavior. And that's why many of these systems, even relatively simple organizations like schools of fish, are so mysterious to us. Schooling fish have become a very powerful organism for us because, like all other vertebrates, they have to solve many challenges. They live in a dangerous environment that's unpredictable, and they have to take in this complex sensory information and translate that into movement controls. And we don't really understand how these organisms do that. Computational techniques to understand how each individual takes in this complex time, the data we need to try to understand how the emergent collective behavior arises from the interactions among.
We know that there's dominant individuals, subordinates, there's males, females, there's larger individuals, smaller ones. And right now we're really trying to see how these differences can affect the behavior of the collective. Escape behavior in fish is extremely fast. So we have to shoot in high speed. Filming at 120 frames per second, it takes roughly 5 to 6 frames for this fish to go back inside of the coral.
Collective intelligence relies on the individual components to gather evidence themselves towards the problem, not be told what to think. And so we find again and again when we look at animal groups that in actual fact, they've evolved strategies to avoid having overly correlated information. Unfortunately, the dynamics of schooling fish and really then apply that to a wide range of other systems from neural dynamics to social dynamics. And so I think it's that insight that there's a collective intelligence, an intelligence that goes beyond the individual, that's embedded somehow in this collective, that's really become a focus of research in the last few years.
From protection, breeding, and feeding, through to travel or migration. Marine ecosystems exhibit some of the most obvious examples, and 80% of all fish species enter into schooling behavior at some stage in their life cycles. Multiple species of fish come together to form shoals, like those here over the coral reefs and rocky pinnacles surrounding Koh Tao in the Gulf of Thailand. Schools of individual fish species also appear in this area in large numbers. These aggregations can be some of the most impressive in nature, as they dance and weave at high speeds in perfect synchrony, like a single giant organism, as if they were interconnected by a network of invisible neurons. As spectacular as it is to witness, it's perhaps more amazing when one considers the questions of how and why. Why do they come together in these shoals and schools? And how did this behavior evolve? How do they stay together in such tight-knit units? And how do these collectives make decisions about their movements and behavior so rapidly? In this short film, we aim to explore some of these questions. Below the glassy waters of Turtle Island, it's easy to find both schooling and shoaling behavior. Here at Chumpon Pinnacle, a large school of fusiliers show that more fish mean more eyes with which they can locate potential threats. When one reacts to danger, they all warn each other and react together, sweeping from place to place in near perfect harmony. Contrary to popular opinion, schools don't form deliberate shapes as if to mimic a giant fish to scare off predators. The confusion, however, created by multiple silver bodies moving in perfect unison, causes a sensory overload in the predator, meaning that they cannot distinguish between individuals and are unable to select a target. Predators such as these trevally can often be seen trying to separate the school to make it easier to pick out individuals. There is a dilution effect by being in a school. For any given predator attack, the proportion of individuals taken will be lower the larger the school is, and so each individual has a higher chance of surviving the attacks. An increased ability to locate resources is also a likely driving force in the evolution of schooling. Many of the schooling species located around Koh Tao are forage fish, which feed on zooplankton such as these fusiliers. Zooplankton are incredibly adept at detecting approaching predators using their sensitive antennae. This ability to detect oncoming predators is also backed up by incredible speed and the ability to jump out of the way of predators. On the counter-offensive, these forage fish have developed a behavior called ram feeding, which involves the school forming into a grid with equal spacing between each fish. These spacing arrangements, amazingly, are exactly equal in length to the distance that the zooplankton can jump, and with the zooplankton only being able to jump up to 80 times, they are effectively jumping into another fish's mouth, ensuring the whole school gets fed. A remarkable evolutionary feature. Alongside these feeding benefits come advantages in reproductive activity. A shoal consists of multiple species of fish brought together by their need for refuge and food, and is most commonly encountered amidst the tropical coral reefs of the world. As seen here at Chumpon Pinnacle, shoals will also contain multiple members of the same species, so it should be easier to find mates than if the population were spread out across the open ocean. Many fish found around reefs are ones which have found lifelong mates such as these bannerfish. Further still, in addition to these benefits, fish in shoals and schools are energy efficient. It has been found that the tail beat frequency of a school was significantly higher in the fish located at the front of the school than the individuals in the middle, which apparently benefit from some form of a slipstream effect. It would be reasonable to assume that there is some energy efficient advantages to travelling in schools, particularly amongst migratory fish, which have to travel thousands of miles to their breeding, feeding and nursery grounds. With all of these advantages for shoaling and schooling, it's not hard to imagine the evolution of this behaviour. The age-old safety in numbers philosophy doesn't ring any truer than when you consider schooling fish species. Many scientists believe that schooling evolved through the selfish fish principle. An individual fish will try and put as many others between itself and danger as possible in order to stay alive. Predators can relatively easily pick off individual fish and those at the edge of a group. Natural selection will therefore favour the genes of fish which have the tendency to swim to the centre of the group. These survival genes have sustained through time, resulting in the highly efficient, highly compact schools we see today. Survival being the name of the game, it is also highly likely that this behaviour has evolved through the increased chance of catching prey. A single fish would have very little chance of successfully catching zooplankton, whereas working in a team, the chances become much higher. The quicker the zooplankton became, the larger these groups became, until entire schools of fish formed, all working and moving together to catch their prey. And with movement in mind, how do these fish move in such synchrony, evading predators and obstacles without ever breaking the chain or bumping into each other? Is this behavior learned, or is it embedded in their nature? Young fish do in fact practice schooling behavior. At first, they make attempts in pairs, but as they grow older, they begin to develop into larger groups. We start to gain the impression then that schooling is not a learned activity, but an instinctive one, absent of parental influence, integral from birth. To be able to stay in such close proximity and move the way schools of fish do without collisions, the fish have developed sensory systems which give them a great deal of information about their surroundings. First and foremost, fish use sight. A fish's eye is located directly on the side of their head, so that they can see the fish next to them, and more importantly, the bodily markers present on most schooling fish's bodies. These markers help them maintain their position in relation to their neighbours. The eye is very important for the maintenance of position and angle in a school. Speed and direction is monitored using a sensory organ called the lateral line, which is located on either side of a fish's body, from the back of its gills to the base of the tail. The lateral line has been found to be sensitive to changes in water currents and vibration in water. These two senses work as opposing forces to maintain the distance between each fish in the school. With this amazing ability to synchronize their movements, how do they know in which direction to move when confronted with predators, where to stop and forage, and when and where to migrate? Their almost telepathic ability to move as one when a predator attacks is based on a behavior called consensus decision making. The individuals in a school will watch what the majority of its neighbors are doing and will follow suit. When one side of a school is attacked, the fish closest to the danger will take evasive action, causing a ripple effect through the school as the rest react to this new movement by their neighbors. This behavior will usually result in the correct decision, as each individual fish will be acting in its own best interests. It is during the nighttime, however, that the schools will disintegrate into shoals as the fish attempt to take refuge in the coral. They do this because their sight is extremely limited at night and are unable to maintain a tight-knit school. And it's during this time predators such as these barracuda will begin to hunt and take advantage of their inability to form schools. Schooling behavior seems to have all the answers the fish need to live their lives in relative comfort and safety. But is the story all good? Some species have learned to thrive on this behavior. Whale sharks, for example, have recently been documented gulping up vast numbers of young mackerel and anchovies as they swim through schools determined to pack closer together, making a huge feast a relatively simple task. As in all ecosystems, survival of the fittest relies on evolution and counter-evolution of predators and prey. A race played out over millions of years as tiny adjustments in the genes and behavior allow some to thrive and others to fall by the wayside. As human evolution continues, so do the many ways in which we find to make our lives easier and more comfortable. Obviously, fishing is a large part of our civilization, and large schools of fish could not provide a more inviting target to fishermen, with all the technology at their disposal such as fish finders, huge fishing nets, and massive trawlers. With around 70,000 fishing boats in the Gulf of Thailand alone, we are slowly but surely wiping the seas clean by taking advantage of this utterly spectacular behavior, which has taken millions of years to evolve.